The maritime navigation systems across the Black Sea operated within their normal accuracy parameters. On August 14, 2024, shipping coordinators monitored vessel traffic through one of the world's busiest maritime corridors with the routine precision that keeps global commerce flowing. GPS receivers aboard 340 commercial vessels, cargo ships, tankers, container carriers, grain transporters, calculated positions accurate to within meters. Automatic identification systems broadcast location data that prevented collisions and coordinated port approaches. Traffic separation schemes guided ships through narrow channels connecting the Black Sea to global trade routes. Nothing indicated that navigation signals were being systematically corrupted through carefully orchestrated interference. The first indication appeared as a minor position discrepancy that seemed routine enough to ignore. At 03:52 UTC, the bridge crew of a grain carrier approaching the Bosphorus Strait noticed a 180-meter difference between their GPS position and their radar-derived location. The deviation remained well within acceptable variance for position cross-checking procedures. The officer who logged the discrepancy attributed it to temporary GPS signal degradation from atmospheric conditions and continued the approach using visual navigation and radar. The GPS position corrected itself within 8 minutes. The incident closed as standard operational variance requiring no investigation. But the navigation corruption was spreading. Over the next 22 hours, similar anomalies appeared across vessels operating in Black Sea waters. A tanker near the Romanian coast reported brief coordinate shifts. Container ships transiting Turkish waters logged intermittent position jumps. Bulk carriers in Ukrainian shipping lanes experienced unexplained GPS drift that corrected spontaneously. Each event appeared isolated. Different vessels, different locations, different GPS equipment manufacturers. The incidents remained below thresholds that would trigger coordinated alerts because maritime navigation operated through independent ship systems with separate monitoring authorities. At 02:17 UTC the following day, the pattern became impossible to ignore. 47 vessels simultaneously reported GPS position errors exceeding 400 meters, deviations large enough to place ships outside designated traffic lanes and create potential collision risks. The navigation failures appeared in coordinated geographic progression, starting from vessels near the eastern Black Sea coast and propagating westward toward the Bosphorus in less than 13 minutes. Maritime coordination centers across the region initiated emergency protocols. Ship navigation remained functional. Vessels could still use radar, visual references, and inertial systems. But GPS-dependent routing had degraded into manual navigation requiring constant bridge attention and reduced traffic throughput. The International Maritime Organization activated its Navigation Safety Crisis Center. What looked like scattered equipment problems was revealing itself as systematic sabotage. GPS navigation systems weren't experiencing random failures. They were being deliberately spoofed. Every commercial vessel transiting the Black Sea depended on GPS for efficient navigation through congested waters. When position accuracy degraded by hundreds of meters, ships needed to reduce speed, increase separation distances, and assign additional crew to continuous bridge watches. The cascading effect threatened to create traffic bottlenecks that would disrupt global supply chains dependent on Black Sea shipping routes. Technical teams began reconstructing the attack timeline. The GPS manipulation had been active for at least 24 hours before the simultaneous position error event made the pattern visible. During that period, navigation systems had experienced progressive degradation that appeared consistent with atmospheric interference or equipment aging. The attackers had been testing response thresholds, introducing graduated position errors to map how vessels reacted and what deviation levels would force manual navigation without triggering immediate crisis response. Analysis teams identified the spoofing methodology within 9 hours of full alert status. The attack used multiple ground-based GPS transmitters positioned around the Black Sea coast to broadcast false navigation signals. The The transmitters mimicked legitimate GPS satellite signals but introduced carefully calibrated position errors that varied by location. Ships in different parts of the Black Sea received different false positions, creating a distorted navigation environment where GPS showed vessels in incorrect locations while appearing to function normally. The technical analysis revealed alarming sophistication. Rather than simply jamming GPS signals or broadcasting uniform false positions, the operation created a graduated position offset field across the entire Black Sea. Vessels closer to certain coastal areas received larger position errors, while ships in other zones experienced smaller deviations. This created a navigation gradient that would have forced vessels off their planned routes in predictable patterns that could be exploited for strategic purposes or to create deliberate shipping disruptions. If the operation had continued undetected for another 16 hours, it would have intersected with peak shipping traffic when daily cargo movements reached maximum density. The Black Sea handles approximately 11% of global grain exports, 8% of petroleum product shipments, and critical supply routes for 430 million people across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. During peak operations, the narrow Bosphorus Strait, the primary connection between the Black Sea and Mediterranean, accommodates up to 140 vessel transits daily through a channel barely 700 meters wide at its narrowest point. The cascade modeling revealed the scale of what had been narrowly avoided. With degraded GPS navigation during peak traffic periods, vessels would have been forced to reduce transit speeds by approximately 40% and increase separation distances by 60% to maintain safety margins using radar and visual navigation alone. The Bosphorus throughput capacity would have dropped from 140 daily transits to approximately 85 transits. The backlog of waiting vessels would have grown by 55 ships per day, creating a maritime traffic jam affecting global supply chains within 72 hours. The consequences extended beyond shipping delays. The Black Sea region exports 180 million tons of grain annually, wheat, corn, and barley feeding populations across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. A sustained navigation disruption forcing reduced Bosphorus throughput would have delayed grain shipments during critical planting seasons in recipient countries. The food security implications affected 89 million people in importing nations dependent on timely grain deliveries. Agricultural economists estimated that a 2-week shipping disruption would have increased global grain prices by 12–18%, affecting food affordability in vulnerable regions. Energy security represented another critical vulnerability. The Black Sea routes carry 2.8 million barrels of petroleum products daily: crude oil, refined fuels, and liquefied natural gas. Many European countries depended on these energy flows for power generation and industrial operations. A navigation-induced shipping slowdown would have created fuel supply uncertainties affecting 67 million people and forced activation of strategic petroleum reserves. The economic modeling indicated losses exceeding 8.3 billion euros from a sustained 2-week disruption to energy shipments. Maritime safety concerns compounded the strategic implications. The Bosphorus Strait threads through Istanbul, a city of 16 million people, with residential areas within meters of the shipping channel. Degraded navigation, increasing collision risks, or grounding incidents could have created environmental catastrophes in densely populated urban areas. A single tanker accident in the strait could have released hundreds of thousands of tons of petroleum into waters adjacent to Europe's largest city, creating ecological damage and evacuation requirements affecting millions of residents. The National Security Agency had been tracking the GPS spoofing operation since 0730 UTC on the first day, more than 18 hours before maritime authorities recognized the coordinated pattern. The initial detection came from signals intelligence platforms monitoring electromagnetic emissions across the Black Sea region. The platforms identified GPS frequency transmissions originating from coastal locations that didn't correspond to known navigation infrastructure. The signal characteristics matched previous maritime spoofing operations but demonstrated enhanced sophistication in geographic coordination. Within 8 hours, NSA analysts had mapped the complete transmitter network, identified 19 spoofing sites, and begun coordinating with regional partners on neutralization strategy. The challenge wasn't just stopping the false GPS signals. It was doing so without creating navigation chaos as vessels transitioned from spoofed positions back to accurate coordinates. Ships had been adjusting their navigation based on false GPS data, and abruptly correcting positions by 400+ meters could cause automated collision avoidance systems to trigger emergency maneuvers in congested waters. The countermeasure deployment began at 04:45 UTC. Naval vessels from multiple countries moved to positions enabling detection and localization of the spoofing transmitters. Specialized electronic warfare systems began selective jamming designed to suppress the false GPS signals while allowing legitimate satellite signals to reach ship receivers. The jamming required precise calibration. Too much power would eliminate all GPS navigation, while too little would allow the spoofing to persist. Maritime authorities simultaneously coordinated with vessel operators to prepare for GPS restoration. Ships received advisories to reduce speed, increase bridge watches, and prepare for position corrections as spoofing suppression progressed. The coordination involved 340 vessels from 67 different nations, each operating under different flag state regulations and company procedures. The unprecedented international coordination demonstrated both the severity of the threat and the complexity of responding to navigation attacks affecting global commerce. The navigation restoration took 83 minutes. Vessels gradually transitioned from spoofed GPS positions to accurate satellite navigation while electronic warfare systems suppressed the false signals. The transition created temporary position uncertainties that required heightened vigilance from bridge crews. But the coordinated approach prevented the collision risks that could have resulted from unmanaged position corrections. By 06:10 UTC, all affected vessels had returned to accurate GPS navigation and resumed normal traffic patterns. Ground teams moved to locate and disable the spoofing transmitters. They found 19 installations positioned around the Black Sea coastline from Turkey to Ukraine to Russia to Georgia. Each site consisted of commercial GPS simulator equipment modified for enhanced power output and networked for coordinated operation. The equipment wasn't particularly sophisticated in individual components. Most elements were available through standard electronics suppliers. What made the operation dangerous was the coordination, the strategic understanding of maritime choke points, and the precise calibration required to create the graduated position offset field. By 14:30 UTC, Black Sea shipping had returned to normal operations. Maritime authorities issued navigation warnings regarding potential residual GPS interference and recommended enhanced position cross-checking procedures for the next week. Port authorities reviewed their traffic management protocols. Shipping companies updated their bridge procedures for operating during GPS degradation. The immediate crisis had been contained, but the vulnerability remained. The investigation revealed additional troubling details. The GPS spoofing equipment had been in position for at least 28 days before activation, operating in monitoring mode to gather data about maritime traffic patterns and navigation signal characteristics. This reconnaissance period allowed the operators to calibrate their spoofing for maximum disruption to shipping while minimizing early detection. The activation timing, overnight before peak daily traffic, was clearly chosen to allow position errors to accumulate and create maximum impact during busy shipping periods. The geographic targeting showed strategic understanding of maritime economics and geography. The spoofing operation focused on approaches to the Bosphorus Strait, the single choke point controlling access between the Black Sea and global shipping routes. Degrading navigation in this specific area would create bottleneck effects that propagated through entire supply chains. The 16-hour window before peak traffic represented the operational time frame needed to create exploitable shipping disruptions. The operation also highlighted cascading vulnerabilities in global logistics. Maritime shipping disruptions don't just delay individual cargoes, they cascade through interconnected supply chains. Manufacturing facilities awaiting raw materials halt production. Food processors expecting grain shipments face inventory shortages. Power plants depending on coal or gas deliveries consider load reductions. The compounding effect extends economic impacts far beyond the immediate shipping delays. Regional authorities and the NSA conducted extensive analysis of the transmitter equipment and operational patterns. The technical fingerprints showed innovations beyond previous maritime GPS spoofing, specifically the graduated position offset field and the sophisticated coordination across 19 transmitter sites. This suggested either capability advancement by known threat actors or new operators with specialized expertise in maritime navigation vulnerabilities and strategic choke point targeting. The incident triggered comprehensive reviews of GPS dependency in maritime operations. Shipping companies accelerated training on non-GPS navigation methods and enhanced equipment for radar and celestial navigation. Port authorities implemented additional verification procedures for vessel positions in congested waters. International maritime organizations updated their protocols for detecting and responding to coordinated navigation attacks. But the fundamental vulnerability persisted. Commercial shipping would continue to rely heavily on GPS for efficient navigation. The Bosphorus and other strategic choke points would remain vulnerable to navigation disruption. The GPS satellites would continue broadcasting unencrypted signals that sophisticated ground-based transmitters could overpower. The only effective defense remained detection and rapid response, exactly what this operation had been designed to evade long enough to create strategic shipping disruptions. The behavioral analysis revealed concerning operational characteristics. The 28-day reconnaissance period demonstrated patience exceeding typical maritime security incidents. Most attacks on shipping sought immediate impact through piracy, smuggling, or direct sabotage. This operation showed different characteristics: prolonged observation, careful calibration of navigation attacks, and timing coordinated with peak traffic patterns to maximize economic and strategic impact. Geopolitical analysts noted the strategic implications. Maritime choke points represented critical nodes in global trade that military forces couldn't easily defend against electronic attacks. A successful operation creating sustained shipping disruptions through navigation degradation would demonstrate vulnerabilities in the global logistics networks that modern economies depended upon. The timing coincided with ongoing tensions regarding maritime access rights and energy shipment routes. Economic modeling assessed long-term market effects beyond the immediate incident. The demonstrated vulnerability of GPS navigation in strategic waters created new risk assessments for maritime insurance and shipping contracts. Vessel operators began factoring navigation attack scenarios into route planning and schedule buffers. The risk premium for Black Sea shipping increased measurably, affecting freight rates and ultimately consumer prices for affected commodities. Environmental organizations expressed concern about ecological risks from navigation attacks. The Black Sea ecosystem had already experienced significant stress from pollution and overfishing. A navigation-induced ship collision or grounding could release petroleum or chemical cargoes that would devastate marine environments and coastal communities. The incident highlighted how cyber attacks on navigation systems created environmental vulnerabilities that extended beyond traditional security concerns. Research institutions studying maritime security identified fundamental tensions between efficiency and resilience. Modern shipping optimized for maximum throughput and minimal costs, which meant operating with tight schedules and minimal safety margins in congested waters. This efficiency left little buffer to absorb navigation disruptions. Building more resilient maritime systems with slower speeds, wider separation, and redundant position verification would significantly increase shipping costs that affected global trade economics. the technical community developed improved detection mechanisms for maritime GPS spoofing. The position manipulation had evaded standard monitoring because individual vessel experiences appeared consistent with natural signal degradation. The new detection approaches used fleet-wide position correlation to identify systematic patterns across multiple vessels. Recognizing that coordinated position errors affecting numerous ships indicated deliberate spoofing rather than equipment problems. International law specialists debated legal frameworks applicable to GPS attacks on commercial shipping. The spoofing occurred from coastal transmitters affecting vessels in international waters, creating jurisdictional ambiguities. Existing maritime law addressed piracy, collision liability, and environmental damage, but provided limited guidance for electronic navigation attacks. The legal uncertainties complicated both attribution and coordinated international response. Shipping technology companies began developing enhanced navigation systems with spoofing resistance. These systems cross-reference GPS with other position sources, including inertial navigation, radar positioning, and ground-based beacons. Implementation required significant investment in equipment upgrades across global shipping fleets, costs that shipping companies struggled to justify absent regulatory requirements or insurance incentives. Maritime insurance underwriters reviewed their coverage frameworks following the incident. Standard policies addressed traditional navigation risks like collisions and groundings, but didn't explicitly cover GPS spoofing scenarios. The demonstrated attack methodology required new policy language and risk assessment models. Several major insurers announced premium adjustments for vessels operating in GPS-vulnerable waters. The incident accelerated discussions about alternative navigation technologies for maritime applications. Satellite navigation systems beyond GPS, European Galileo, Russian GLONASS, Chinese Beidou, offered some redundancy but remained vulnerable to similar spoofing techniques. True resilience required fundamentally different positioning approaches that didn't depend on radio signals vulnerable to ground-based interference. Port authorities in strategic choke point locations implemented enhanced traffic management procedures designed to maintain safety during GPS degradation. The protocols included mandatory speed reductions, increased pilot requirements, and temporary traffic flow restrictions when navigation accuracy fell below specified thresholds. The procedures reduced maximum port throughput but provided structured approaches to managing navigation uncertainty. Naval forces operating in the Black Sea region conducted assessments of navigation vulnerability. Military vessels used encrypted GPS receivers designed to resist spoofing, but civilian shipping disruption created operational complications. The incident prompted reviews of military procedures for operating in environments where civilian navigation had been deliberately degraded. Diplomatic channels addressed the incident through careful coordination that avoided escalating regional tensions. The spoofing transmitters had been positioned in multiple countries with complex political relationships. The diplomatic approach emphasized maritime safety and economic stability rather than direct accusations. Technology assessment teams evaluated the attacker's operational capabilities based on recovered equipment. The ability to coordinate 19 transmitter sites to create a graduated position, offset field required specialized software and detailed understanding of GPS signal structure. These technical requirements narrowed attribution possibilities to actors with significant resources. Commercial shipping companies revised operational procedures based on incident lessons. Bridge crews received updated training on recognizing GPS spoofing indicators. Ship operators installed additional positioning equipment to provide redundancy during GPS degradation. Implementation timelines extended over years as vessels underwent scheduled maintenance. Grain exporting nations conducted food security assessments examining vulnerability to maritime choke point disruptions. A sustained navigation attack forcing shipping delays would have affected national budgets, farmer incomes, and international trade relationships. The assessments prompted discussions about diversifying export routes, Energy importing nations reviewed strategic petroleum reserve policies in light of demonstrated shipping vulnerabilities. The navigation attack demonstrated that supply interruptions could result from cyber attacks rather than traditional supply shocks, requiring updated decision frameworks for reserve deployment. Academic researchers identified the maritime navigation attack as exemplifying systemic vulnerabilities in globalized logistics. The operation affected a single geographic choke point but created ripple effects through interconnected supply chains serving hundreds of millions of people. The systems remained stable. GPS receivers calculated accurate positions. Vessels transited shipping lanes with normal efficiency. The Bosphorus maintained its flow of 140 daily vessel movements. The 430 million people dependent on Black Sea trade routes received their grain, energy, and manufactured goods without awareness of the navigation vulnerabilities that could have disrupted their supplies for weeks. Everything worked normally, until the moment it wouldn't.